So welcome to our YouTube channel, Mama Chow and Spicy Wonton. And today we're going to go way back in time to Zhou ShanPei, we talked about in the first episode. Mama Chow's, grandfather, my great-grandfather in that era, and back in the 1950s, right? Mid-1950s or so. And before we quickly start, I just want to acknowledge there were a few comments about in our channel about me interrupting Mama Chow. And so I take the feedback and try to interrupt less. The thing that we're trying to balance, or I'm trying to balance, is that timing. We try to keep these videos short. Um, and then also related to the language, sometimes I also get feedback that people can't really hear or understand what Mama Chow's saying. So, but yeah, so we heard the comments.
Okay, I understand why this is happening. I would like to try to improve my English, but being my age is not possible. So I try my best. So if you guys don't understand, too bad. That's all I can do.
Yeah, I mean, you're fluent in English. You went to, graduate school in the US. So, but yeah, we'll try to work through that. So anyway, moving this over to Mama Chow.
Okay, okay. I would like to talk to you guys about my grandfather more, and especially how much my grandfather changed and reformed Sichuan. But when I look at my memoir, there's really too much talk in one episode about what he was doing. But I would try in the future to divide those what he did for Sichuan in sections.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's a future. There's so many
future.
more we can talk about Zhou ShanPei, but today is really about his ties to some influential people in the Kuomintang or Chiang Kai-shek's kind of administration, right? And then sort of those relationships. So yeah. Can you turn off that? What is buzzing? You got to turn that off. Sorry. This is not prepared.
I don't know.
Yeah. Then we need to turn off the volume on that. Okay. Usually we have it off before this, but okay.
Okay, I don't know how. But anyway, okay.
Sorry.
Today I will talk some of the daily conversation between my grandfather and his children after dinner, casual talk. And after dinner, he would talk to his sons and the girls. Sometimes they come home, sometimes they don't. So he tried to tell them what happened during his life.
Yeah.
And before the Communist Party took over China in 1949, and this one night, Li Zongren, who is the vice president of Jiang Jieshi, Republic
That's
of China.
Chiang Kai-shek, yeah.
Chiang Kai-shek, vice president. He's also general. And he came to a house late in the night to ask my grandfather's advice.
Yeah.
Whether to continue or discontinue fighting with the PLA, People Republic Chinese Liberation Party's army. Okay, when he came, my grandfather just gave him a couple advice. Number one, if you want to continue fighting, you are not capable with the ability, with the Chiang Kai-shek's ability. They're losing all the way. They're losing anyway. So that's number one advice. Number two, if you want to talk for a peace deal, you have no resources or capital. He's very practical. a lot of time people ask him for advice.
Hmm.
They have to come to a house because by then there is no telecommunication. You
Right.
cannot put on a
Yeah,
computer. You
you
have to,
can't use
yeah.
internet. But so this happened in 1949, you said, right?
1949 is the Communist Party take over China, controlling.
Yeah,
But
but
this conversation happened is before that, in the 1940s,
okay.
but before 49.
Before 49, right.
Yeah.
So,
So
mhm,
after Li Zongren went back to Jiang Jieshi, the next day,
mhm.
Jiang Jieshi declared surrender.
Okay, that's like Chiang Kai-shek, the Kuomintang.
Kuomintang.
So yeah, so reportedly, we don't, that's what happened. The next day after this general Li Zongren talked to your grandfather for advice, the next day his party, Chiang Kai-shek's party, Kuomintang, surrendered, and that's the one of the dominant parties in Taiwan right now. It's not the
Yes.
only one, but it's one of them. So,
So
um,
after that, after 49, communist China controlling the whole China,
right. But so
changed the
basically,
name.
your grandfather is just giving. He wasn't necessarily pro or anti-Taiwan. We don't want to get into this discussion at this stage, but he was kind of giving reality bites kind of advice discussion. Like what kind of resources do you have? Do you have weapons? Do you have, enough soldiers? Do you have capital? If you don't, then you should probably, think about, think twice.
Yeah, after that, the Communist Party controlling China.
Hmm.
Chairman Mao is the leader,
Yeah.
and apparently my grandfather declared his side. He's
Hmm.
standing
Right.
firmly behind Mao.
Right.
That's what
But
happened.
even though he did, just to be clear, there's a lot of division within most Chinese families, including your own family, about whether, pro-Taiwan, anti-Taiwan. This is very common. This is a very divisive issue within most Chinese families, I would say, that have ties to mainland China and Taiwan. And that doesn't, prevent even your own father, which you said earlier, was visiting very prominent, well-known political leaders, in military leaders, frankly, in Taiwan, right? You mentioned one of them was Zhang Qun. We can have a separate episode about him, but maybe briefly talk about Zhang Qun.
Yeah, Zhang Qun and my grandfather, the different level. They're very, very close.
Yeah, and
He
so this
was a
is
student of my grandfather.
mm-hmm. Okay. A student of your grandfather, and he was also very prominent. He settled in Taiwan. He was originally from Sichuan, but he settled in Taiwan. And he, at least according to Wikipedia, he was very prominent. He met the Pope at the time. And he was in meetings with Zhou Enlai and George Marshall, among others. And apparently he also has very good genes, by the way, Mama Chow. I looked up this thing, they have this about his personal life. Everybody in his family basically lived over 90 years old, including his
Oh,
his own sons, and he lived into 100 something. So anyway, whatever his genes are, they're very good. They're very good genes. So that's just an example. We'll have a separate episode about famous people that came to your grandfather for advice, that are very well known in history. But to go to your original story about how your grandfather
yeah, the
spoke to,
answer
yeah.
my grandfather gave to the Li Zongren and Jiang Jieshi is very similar to the answer he gave to his children.
Yeah.
Especially my father,
Hmm.
uncle, and aunt.
Yeah.
And after Chairman Mao took over China, after a few years, everybody noticed the political revolution, one after another, non-stop,
It's
continue.
exhausting. It was exhausting because these
Yeah,
revolutions didn't help anybody's lives. It was just a lot of upheaval and instability, and it was still the middle of famine kind of issues happening. So what did Zhou Enlai, your grandfather, say? What was his reality conversation with his children?
what's on my
I mean, Zhou ShanPei, sorry.
Chou Shanpei.
What did he say?
Okay,
They're all Zhous. What did he
okay.
say?
So one night,
Yeah.
he was talking to his children. he asked them.
Yeah.
I think there's my father and another three uncle and one aunt. So he asked them. He said, "You guys are not happy, are you?" No. Everybody said no. Do you
This is
agree?
mid 50s, right? 1950s, mid
Yeah,
50s.
in the mid 50s. You do you agree or uh, agree any policy of this government? No. Okay. Their answer is no. Uh, you want to leave? Answer is yes.
This is the
And
Chinese Communist government. When he's asking his children, he's like, "Do you agree with the Communist Party? Do you want to leave China?" Basically, he's asking his children, right? That includes your
and
father.
he said, "Where you want to? Where you want to live to?"
Mm-hmm.
They don't know, no idea. And how? They don't know. Okay, you have no choice, right? You have to stay here. And my grandfather said, just like same answer to Li Zongren.
Yeah.
If you guys have to stay in China, then you have to obey the policy, obey the leader, shut up your mouth, and do everything the government wants. So actually, that's what they did. But
Mm-hmm.
except my father, he
Yeah,
has big
we
mouth.
covered that in an earlier episode.
Yeah, we said
Yeah.
that before. That's why it makes him into a very big trouble for his life
Mm-hmm.
in China. And one thing my grandfather, I think my grandfather very smart,
Yeah.
very straight-headed, very logical, very strategic man.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I don't think he's flexible enough because he has hold his principle. It's sometimes you cannot hold your principle
You're
so
talking about your
firm.
father or
My
who?
grandfather,
Your
my
grandfather.
grandfather. So he asked his son's daughter to do that.
Mm-hmm.
His lifetime, one time he did not do that, caused himself in big trouble in Sichuan. So
I
we
know.
can talk
Well,
about that.
this is a philosophical question, right? I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about your father and him being too outspoken, which caused problems with the family in episode 6, but it is a fundamental question whether at what point in your life should you stand up for your convictions and be outspoken or principled, and when should you be quiet? We definitely need to turn off that phone, Mama Chow, before the
Okay.
next episode. Anyway,
Okay.
these are the issues. You audience members, you don't know how many times we've had to spend many minutes over the same issue. The phone, the volume control on on your iPhone is in the same place as the generational issue, which I think maybe our audience members can relate to. But yeah, it's a philosophical question. When should you speak up? When should you not? I mean, this is what the difference between 1989, which we won't get into, but it's there were protests, at the time in Beijing, and then it was crushed and then it died down. But what happened in Eastern Europe or and in Russia was they went on, they kind of pushed through. They had different cultural mentality about what was important to them, and it was more important, that was more important to them. The freedom, the political speech was important to more people in those countries and cultures than being quiet. So it depends. It is a trade-off. So and there are cultural differences between societies, how they navigate that. So with that, we will wrap this episode up and have a lot more episodes coming, probably going further into history. And thanks for joining, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Okay. Thank you for listening. Bye.